gentlemen, a round of applause for the mayor.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everybody. We left out, Dan left out, an important visitor. I want you to meet Ramon Valadez, who's the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. He's better known at our house as the guy who introduced my wife to Angry Birds. As you see on the screen, I have a subtitle for this afternoon. It's the state of the town from a government viewpoint. Now, you're probably not surprised that the mayor would take a government viewpoint of things, but don't be scared. I know that for some people, government is a four-letter word, no matter what level we're talking about. But really, at least in the smaller towns, the government is really just the system that we've adopted to take decisions as important. And here, and I think in the other jurisdictions represented here, this is very true. Anyone can come in and see me or the other council members, the managers, or the department head. And I think here we really do have government of the people. Now, it's a little harder, I know, in larger jurisdictions to do that, but here we're fine. Now, I'm thinking of our town, Sahuarita, as a small town. Our population was about 26,000, up from about 3,000 in the 2000 census. So we've grown considerably. But it turns out that we're actually pretty big by Arizona standards. It turns out that the median size of a municipality in our state is about 9,000. So we're really in the upper levels population-wise. Now, I'm going to try two experiments today, or different things, but I'm not going to try the two that we were talking about just earlier. My colleagues and friends from another jurisdiction, from Oro Valley, were talking to me, and they asked whether I was going to lip sync the speech. And I said I wasn't going to do that, but it occurred to me that might not be a bad idea, but one would not want to use one's own voice for the lip sync. You'd want to have a better one in some way or another. So, the two innovations or differences for today. First of all, last year, as you may remember, I prepared a formal speech which I read. And I kind of pride myself in writing, and I like to do that. But my colleagues all tell me that I'm much better when I speak extemporaneously. So today I've got some notes, but it's going to be mostly winging it and off the cuff. And secondly, the first president, and I'm not comparing myself to the president, but the first president whom I remember hearing give a State of the Union address was President Eisenhower on the radio. And we've all heard a bunch of those. And it never really is a State of the Union address. It's sometimes a campaign speech or second term, getting ready for the policies and the programs and such. So today I'm going to try to really do a state of the town. Let's take a look at what are our current conditions and how can we move forward. And I'm going to use this SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats model to do this. Now, last year at this time, the theme was pathways. And then I traced out some ancient physical pathways for the movement of people and goods and led that into the future, into the present, and then into the future about where we might be going. Today's theme is vistas. So we want to imagine walking along the pathway of the town, but stop and take a look at different aspects of it. Now, from a government point of view, we need to think about what are the major activities and duties and responsibilities of our town government. And I think that there are really three of them that really what I would call direct service to the public. One is public safety. The second is roads, streets, and other public infrastructure. The third is parks and recreation. I think if you ask the people in our town, they would tell you that this is what the government should really be about. And of course, in order to do that, the government needs money. And so we want to look at the finances of the town and talk about that. And finally, one that people often don't think about, it's planning for the future and future development of the town. But when people do think about that, and they talk to me, they think that the government, or they overestimate what the government can do. The development of this town and its future is largely tied up in the private sector. And that's as it should be. The town does not own land other than the one places where some of its municipal infrastructure sits. We are not developers. We cannot bring a business or activity or something like that. We can set things up for it to happen. We can advertise and help market the town. We can work with our investors, but of course we're not the primary ones who are going to make this happen. So with that, let's take a look starting at public safety. Now, what is involved with public safety? Well, police protection certainly, fire services, emergency medical services, and our courts. And those everybody would think about. But another aspect of public safety that people don't often think about are our codes and standards and the enforcement of those. Because as complicated as they sometimes seem, these are mostly about making sure that things are safe, both individual structures and the wider community. So, as far as police is concerned, I want to point out some strengths here. We have a highly professional municipal police force. They're well trained and they're very dedicated personnel. And I'm mostly impressed with their community relations. At least once a year I have the opportunity to ride with the police officers around the community to various HOAs and neighborhoods and such. And I'm always impressed by how our officers know the people and the citizens know the officers. And they know the history of what's happened. They're comfortable with each other. And that goes a long way towards having effective policing in our community. If there's a certain weakness, it's mostly the citizens' fault. Our citizens are a little bit too slow or low, if you will, to call 911 to report things. And one of the messages that the officers always bring, when you see anything that seems to be untoward or out of the ordinary, call us and let us come check it out at least. Yes. Okay. I'm going to switch microphones. Okay. Fire services. In our town, we do not have a municipal fire department, but we're served by two excellent fire organizations. The southern part of the town, and for people who know where the boundary is about the south end of Animax Park, drawn in east-west cross. The bottom, the southern part of the town is within the Green Valley Fire District, and the northern part of the town is served by the rural metro. But these are both wonderful fire departments with great response, very capable service, cooperative, that people train together, and this is an excellent thing. And I believe that our town is well served by fire services. Emergency medical services. We're served by Southwest Ambulance, an excellent company. I myself, unfortunately, last year, just a little after this speech, had occasion to use their services, and I thank them very much for their service to the community. Our courts, the presiding judge of the Pima County court system has told us that there are 67 courts in the county, and ours is among the top in effectiveness and service to the citizens, so we're doing well there. Building codes and standards. We, of course, use the international building codes, and these are updated every 3 years. A couple weeks ago at the council, we updated these. But our staff is very careful to make exemptions and changes to suit our situation here. And so we try not to have these onerous regulations and this has to be 6 inches from here and so forth and so on, but to have regulations that will lead to safe and proper construction. We've often also tried to perk up with great success our services to our community. For For example, not too long ago, one of our inspectors went out at midnight to do an inspection of the business so that it could open the next day, this schedule. So we're trying to work very hard with our investors, businesses, to make things happen. Well, what are some weaknesses in the public safety area? Well, one, unfortunately both of these are getting addressed. One is what's technically called the interoperability of communications. And from my experience in Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina, that's a huge thing. In Hurricane Katrina, the state police, the New Orleans Police Department, the military, so forth and so on, all had different communications equipment, protocols, standards, and so forth, and nobody could communicate. The governor in Baton Rouge could not actually speak to the mayor of New Orleans. And they had to pass him, have somebody take the message and take a note over and so forth and so on. Around here, that's being addressed. And in fact, last night in our council meeting, we approved an IGA with the county to work on this interoperability of communication. So county, thank you very much for doing this. This is going to make us all safer in the event that something serious happens. And of course, until recently, one of the problems here with medical services is that we've been a long way from the hospital. But that looks now like it's getting ready to change with the proposed UMC hospital coming in and other medical facilities, some of which I'll talk about in a second. So I believe that we're well on our way to ameliorating those weaknesses. Move on to roads, streets, and public infrastructure. Well, as Dan told you, we're a relatively new town, and so we have relatively new infrastructure. It's all in pretty good shape right now, and we have an aggressive program of repairs and building and so forth and so on. Fortunately, we've been able to attract external funding for this. The biggest project, which is going on right now, about a mile down south of us, are the improvements to Sahuarita Road, which of course the town would not have been able to undertake without external funding through RTA, the Regional Transportation Authority, and the Pima Association of Governments. We'll be working on some other infrastructure. For example, Pima Mine Road has a bridge over the river which needs to be replaced. Probably if you go by there, you see we have weight limits on it. It's not in danger of collapsing or anything, but we do need to replace that. And we have several other of these projects on the books that we'd like to do. The staff also urged me to use paper today instead of tab. Okay, we have some good opportunities. I-19 and Sahuarita Road is the interchange that is most amenable to development between Tucson and Nogales. But it does not meet current interstate standards in a variety of ways, and we need to have that replaced. And of course, that would be a project for the Department of Highways for ADOT, and those are good opportunities, though. ADOT is also doing an El Toro Road corridor study. El Toro Road is about 1 mile south of Sahuarita Road, and we're looking at that, or ADOT is, as a possible next east-west corridor for road development. Nogales Highway, we'll be talking with the county very soon about that. As county plans develop, that I'll talk about in a second, for an aerospace and defense initiative, the improvement of Nogales Highway will be a good thing. And also their plans to extend the Alvernon Road down south. So we've got lots more going on, and Wilmot Road to come. Wilmot in the RTA plan has been designated as a major north-south corridor. Now, what are the threats in this area? Well, they're all financial. First of all, ADOT. ADOT has recently been telling us that their revenues are not going to be nearly what they thought they were. And there will be substantial reductions in ADOT's ability to do new projects. And of course, we'll have to see how that plays out, but that is a major threat. And the other financial threats I'm going to talk about in just a second when I talk about the finances in general. Parks and recreation. Well, what are the strengths? We have a good variety of public parks and recreation programs, 7 public parks, some very large, some rather small, well-maintained. In my judgment, we have excellent work by a relatively small staff in parks and recreation. And one of the things that I think is a great strength here, we have a good system for planning and vetting new projects, or proposed new projects, involving the community. So the people really have a good voice in what we're planning to do in parks and recreation. And surprise, surprise, what are the threats in this arena? None. Finances again. Okay, so now let's look at the finances of the town. I was very impressed when I first came and met people in the town. We have a very professional staff in our finance department and our town manager. And fortunately, they are very financially conservative. When they give projections, they're very conservative ones, both on the revenue side and on the expense side. And when I look back, I like, when people make projections, I like to look back and see what they've done in the past and what the projections were and how they panned out. And very often it's a little bit embarrassing. But with our finance department, in general, what they've predicted has in fact come true. We've had very accurate estimates. I've also been pleased to see that we use very sophisticated models to do these estimations and to evaluate the financial impact of new projects. So we have some software that a number of other towns and cities elsewhere, even much larger, don't have. Now, of course, these models are only as good as the inputs. So you have to look at things like what is the expected population growth and traffic growth and retail sales growth and all that. And there is a real problem in my judgment. I honestly do not trust long-term population growth estimates. Maybe for 4 or 5 years we can get a pretty good estimate, but who would have thought in the year 2000 what the actual population growth of this area has been over the last dozen years or so? We have reserves. We have actual on-hand cash reserves, undedicated, of more than 1 year's revenues into the general fund. So, yes, we're in financially good shape. Another strength is that the finance department just shared this with me last week. The projections show that our general fund revenue should continue to grow. And again, that's based on certain assumptions. There's also continued growth of the business community. Now, I've put this under finances because when you look at it from a government point of view, businesses represent income, either directly through taxes or through increased economic activity and indirect benefits. I fully realize, and the town is fully aware, that there's much more to doing business than tax revenues. And there are advantages to having active businesses, but strictly from a governmental standpoint, I note the continued growth of the business community. I note the expansion of the Jim Quick auto dealership that's now underway. Ace Hardware, Joanne's Fabrics, AutoZone, and Mattress Firm will be opening during this year. The Sahuarita Plaza office building with a confirmed anchor tenant is in the planning stages. And we just had Carondelet announce a 40,000 square foot health pavilion that will be built actually right next to Town Hall, just to the east of Town Hall. So we're doing pretty well there. Some weaknesses in the financial situation. First of all, our retail sales taxes revenues are generally flat. And they've been that way. They're increasing, yes, but they're pretty flat. And this is an issue that hasn't quite gone like I hoped it would. What are the problems here? Well, one is of our own making, that is the citizens. There's too much leakage of retail sales. That is, leakage refers to local residents buying things not locally but elsewhere. And of course here that means largely Tucson. We all buy things in Tucson, that's fine. There's stuff that you can obtain in Tucson that you can't obtain here. But we need to be aware of the great benefits of reducing that leakage and having more local sales. And as you drive around town, you'll see now the shop locally signs about, we're trying to work on that pretty hard. What are some threats? Well, our finances. One is, I touted very much external funding that we really need to do projects, but that's drying up. I talked about ADOT. There will surely be fewer funds from the federal government available in the future. And the matching is so very important, these external funds. There's another potential threat that faces not only our town, but others. And I want to deal with this quickly, but in a little bit of depth, because I'm trying to enlist your help with our legislature to oppose a certain change. Some time ago, our governor wisely appointed a task force to consider the simplification of the tax code so far as it relates. Now, we all usually refer to it as a sales tax, but in Arizona it's not a sales tax. It is a transaction privilege tax, which is important. The theory is that we tax a business for the privilege of doing business transactions in whatever jurisdiction we're talking about. It is not a tax like sales tax, which is a tax on the consumer for the privilege, if you will, of buying something or another. And Arizona's tax code in this regard is, in my opinion, I agree with the governor, it's overly complicated, it's hard for businesses to do. Some of you are with businesses that have activities in multiple jurisdictions, and you know that different jurisdictions tax different things, have different rates, have different reports. So this all needs to be simplified. There is no question about that. But one of the recommendations of this tax force dealt with the construction tax. As it stands now in Sahuarita and in many other places, if any construction that's done, you figure out what the cost of that is, and you take off 35% discount, and the remaining 65% is taxed. In our town, it's at a 4% rate. Now, the commission, the task force rather, has recommended to the governor that that tax be done away with. And instead, constructors, builders pay a sales tax, a retail tax, at the point at which they buy the construction materials. Now, this would have the effect in Sahuarita and the other communities of taking our tax revenue from construction from what it is now down to about zero, because we do not have any major sellers of big construction materials. In fact, it would shift all of that tax basically to the Tucson area and to Phoenix and the Phoenix area in general. And that would be devastating for our town. We use the construction tax for infrastructure projects, for capital projects. And it's our way to try to ensure that growth pays for itself, that present residents and businesses are not overly and unduly taxed for new development. And without that, we're really in a bind. So, does it need to be simplified? Yes. Does it need to be made fair? Yes. But it seems very unreasonable to do away with it. And also, I think there's a policy argument here. Remember, it's a transaction privilege tax. Well, builders and contractors are doing business in a jurisdiction. And it seems unwise to me and unreasonable to exempt them from the transaction privilege tax. Okay. So that's the serious part of it. That's coming up now. So far as I know, as of yesterday, no bills have been filed, but our understanding is that this is going to happen. Okay, so let's move on now to planning for the future and our development. Well, what are the strengths of our town? The location. It's very good, and it's related to Tucson, which of course is the economic driver of our area. We're close enough to be able to go conveniently and to take advantage of all the things, but far enough away to be our own community. And our location with regard to Mexico looms large here. We have a variety of residential opportunities, from master plan communities with all kinds of amenities, to apartments, to older neighborhoods. Anything that a person might want is here. We are having continued population growth. We're projecting about 2% a year growth in the near future. This is a whole lot less than the 30+% a year that we were seeing during the last decade, but nonetheless, it's enough to keep going. Our residents have high education levels and high income, and they desire to work in town. So these are really pluses if you think about it for development. We have very strong K through 12 education in the town. You've met the Sahuarita, the superintendent of the Sahuarita Unified School District, and we also have the Continental School District, which serves students, elementary students, in the southern part of the town. We're also very fortunate in that we have two major property owners with 1,000 acres and more developable area. And both of these have real visions for the community and are willing to work and cooperate with the community to make these come true. And I'm talking about one about Sharp and Associates, the Rancho Sahuarita development, which you see in place today in the town, and there's lots more to come there. And I'm talking about FICO, the Waltons. And they have recently been talking about their plans for the future development of their 6,000 acres in town and another 1,000 acres outside of town, which includes a river master plan for the river to bring that back into some degrees and improve situations there and cure some flooding problems. So when you have large property owners who have a vision and want to do things for the community, good things will happen. And there are also our partnerships. And I'm going to mention some, but I realize that I'm at great risk of leaving out some important ones for which I just will have to apologize. One is the Green Valley Sahuarita Chamber of Commerce. And I think our ties have strengthened over the last year. And I want it to even continue, and I'll talk about that in a second, with the PAG and RTA that I've discussed, with Rancho Sahuarita, the most recent partnership there, there have been many over the years, is the new school complex and aquatic complex that's just to the west of Town Hall. FICO partnership. Those of you who've been down on the Sahuarita Road know that we're improving that dramatically, a new bridge, widening, and all this, and also relocating the intersection of Nogales Highway and Sahuarita Road about 1,000 feet to the west in order to move it away from the railroad tracks. And this will also set up in the future perhaps an overpass over the railroad tracks, but not immediately. That's, I think, will help a lot. Of course, we needed right-of-way from FICO, and I'm pleased to report that through a combination of donations and swapping out the town's existing right-of-way on the Nogales Highway for the new right-of-way we need, the right-of-way costs for that entire project are just about zero. So we thank you very much. And these are examples of these partnerships. And I would be remiss not to talk about our partnerships with the other jurisdictions, with Marana, Oro Valley, South Tucson, and Pima County. The mayors and administrators and leaders there get along very well with each other. We work in a variety of ways. And we all have a regional approach to things, which is very important. Now, what are the weaknesses for our future? Well, a lack of economic diversity. Our economy is built on retail and service sectors and on construction and construction-related activities. In this last round of economic situation here and throughout the country, have, I think, shown us very clearly that this is not a recipe for a sustainable economy. We need to diversify. Another weakness is the lack, or the effects rather, of the national recession, which are very much evident here. It's very interesting. I go, and many of you, I see you at the same places, I go to a number of economic talks where people talk about what's going on and project things. And it doesn't matter what the statistic is. It could be, say, employment. It could be single-family residential housing permits or whatever. The graphs all look the same. They are, and then at the very end, a little bit of an uptick, which gives us some hope that we may have reached bottom and be moving up. But of course, one would love to see a bigger uptick over a longer period of time. So I'm optimistic, but I don't think we have all of the evidence we need to be convinced of that. And in our town, there is a lack of existing commercial buildings, shovel-ready sites, availability of land, price to sell or lease, and actively promoted to target audiences. Economic development, people will note now, there has been a shift in economic development. Now, most projects want existing buildings. They want to come in, take over something, redo it as necessary and so forth, but much of it is about existing buildings. And if not about existing buildings, then shovel-ready sites. Shovel-ready means a site that has infrastructure to it, is zoned correctly, and so forth and so on, so that whoever buys it can come in, do their plans, get their approvals, and start digging, start actual physical construction within 60 or 90 days. And a number of the jurisdictions here have worked towards this very vigorously, and we're doing well. We're a little bit behind on this, but we need to get going. What are the opportunities? Well, last year I talked about the town center, the development to the west of Town Hall, multi-use development. We're still working with Mr. Sharp and his associates to make this happen. And I've spoken about FICO's plans, the River Master Plan, and the Sahuarita Farms Plan. Very important to the town. I can easily stand here and visualize, not too long down the road, but not immediately either, the wonderful town center area in the Spanish colonial style and so forth, with all this mixed-use things, the town square, library, and so forth, transitioning down off of the Rancho Sahuarita properties, down into the FICO properties, with commercial development there, it's saving some of the pecan trees, and moving down to FICO's property on the other side of Nogales Highway, and the wonderful development that they plan there. And this is going to be just a wonderful thing for the town if we can all work together to make it happen. I talked earlier about the Aerospace and Defense Initiative. It's being led by a trio in the county. This is going to be very important. One, by having by sort of abandoning Hughes Access Road and putting the action farther down south, closer to us, and developing an aerospace and defense park and a number of other activities there. We're writing the action on that, and we're going to stay on top of that and see how we can participate. We have annexation and development to the east. I talked about earlier these extensions for Alpernine Road and Wilmot and so forth. Currently, if you go east on Sahuarita Road, the town boundary is at about Country Club Road. We would like very much to extend that down to Wilmot Road and be a big player when that intersection develops. Now, that's all state trust property for the most part, and there'll be lots of things to do, but we have decided to make a start on it. And just a couple of weeks ago, the council voted funding for a plan to look at this area and see what can be done. The idea is not to create more of what we have, but to try to get ahead of things and to figure out what will be the future of life in this desert area. What kind of things will towns and communities in the future have, and can we realize that and be ahead of the game there? That's a tall undertaking, a Herculean effort, maybe. We have a joke about the mayor's trying to use the word Herculean in speeches, so there's my stab. But that's going to be a very big thing. There's the Sun Corridor. Briefly, there are now what we call megapolitans, big metropolitan areas. Think of Washington, D.C. to Boston as one big area, and think of all of the resources and stuff for business and activity, the universities and all that are there. Or take the Chicago area, or take the LA area, and all of that kind of thing. We're going to be one. The area in southern Arizona and up through Tucson and up to Phoenix and so forth and so on. And we need to see how we're going to play in there. Last night, Mr. Kozlow, the chairman of the Chamber's Economic Development Committee, presented a plan for us to start on that, and we'll have some study sessions. I hope that the council will decide to join the Chamber in a partnership to actually make this happen. And there are relationships with Mexican businesses and municipalities that has been spoken about a lot. I'm not going to go into those greatly, but there are lots of contacts there that we need to take advantage of. And it ties in very well with the aerospace initiative, of which Mexico, Sonora in particular, will play a great role. Now, what are our threats to the development? Well, in my opinion, the major long-term threat to our area has to do with water. The fact is, if you look at the local portion of our aquifer, and I'm talking about Sahuarita, Green Valley, and even beyond that, we have an unsustainable overdraft. We are just pumping out much more water than is replenished, either on purpose or through rain and so forth and so on. About 13 billion gallons a year. And that's just unsustainable, and we need to figure that out. There are many dangers from this, not the least of which is subsidence, the sinking, actual sinking of land due to pumping out the water from underneath. Now, I'm very familiar with this from Louisiana. It's kind of ironic there. They pumped oil out for a long time from underneath Louisiana, and you see the subsidence. And interestingly enough, what's the fix there? To pump water to replace the oil. But we don't have those advantages. But that water concern is very important to me. Fortunately, there are a couple projects, one by FICO and one by Community Water Company, that may be able to help us to bring more tap water to the area. And instead of me talking about them, I'm just going to tell you that Thursday of next week, the 7th of February, at 1:30 in the afternoon, there's going to be a State of the Aquifer presentation. It'll be at the East Social Center in Green Valley. It's sponsored by the Green Valley Council, and we'll hear about what is the aquifer, what's the current state of it, what are we doing, what are the projects that may help us with this. And I urge everybody to come and hear that from real experts. I'm a relative newcomer to water here. In Louisiana, water is not a problem. If you have an economic development project that uses lots of water, we can get that for you free and all you want. So that's very different. And the last threat that I'd like to talk about is competition. Please understand that development, economic development in the country, is a very competitive situation. Many other communities in our state and in other states are trying to attract the same kind of businesses to grow, to develop in the same way that we would like to. It's competitive. Entities offer financial and other kinds of considerations to businesses, incentives and so forth, and will do lots of things. Arizona's been lagging, but now seems to be picking up in that regard, and there's more activity. But we are definitely in competition. And along with this competition, I want to point out that there's sometimes, it seems to me, in our community and others, a fear of proceeding with bold action. And a feeling that everything that a government does should work out just perfectly. And we should plan it all out to the nth degree, and nothing should be at risk, and we should just sort of reap rewards. In my opinion, that doesn't happen. As in private businesses, there are risks. Private businesses make mistakes. Private businesses recover or not, and go on and do their things. And it's the same way with towns. Now, we don't want to put public money unnecessarily at risk, But if we think very carefully through, analyze the project, and think it will be good for us, we need to move ahead and do it. Not all projects, any investor will tell you that not all projects are going to pan out. But if you get the one big hit, it can be the beginnings of very good things. Because a success story breeds another success story, breeds another, soon it cascades, and you've got lots of things going. So just remember competition, and we do need to take some good actions. So what are the takeaways from this afternoon? First of all, I'd like you to remember that Sahuarita is a young, ambitious community trying to manage its growth to produce wins for its residents and its investors. As you've heard me talk today, there are more strengths and opportunities than there are weaknesses and threats. And remember about our town, some of you I hope to encourage through this speech to become investors or to increase your investment here. We have no property taxes, no development or impact fees, and we do not charge for our business license. So thank you so very much for being with us this afternoon, and I hope to hear more about the good story of this town in the future through a succession of mayors. So thank you very much.